Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. I'm here with Christa Diaz of Christa Diaz Consulting, who is a friend of mine. We actually met on Instagram. She's been to a yurt circle, and we have a lot of overlap in our journeys, but she's also just a really bright, lighted and spirited soul that I'm excited to chat with about her journey to entrepreneurship, her journey post divorce, motherhood, sobriety. So, Christa is an entrepreneur. And she owns Christa Diaz Consulting, which is basically a business strategy consulting company where she helps entrepreneurs to develop robust and impactful systems for their business. So she really comes in and is like a systems architect. She looks at all of the offerings you have. She looks at how to optimize them. And she's really big in finding, ways to measure the effects of your offerings and really having measurable success with your coaching offerings. And we'll get into how she moved towards this line of work from her conventional 9 to 5. So I'm excited to talk about that because it has a lot to do with being a part of the spiritual community. And so we're going to dig into the shortcomings of the spiritual community and what to look for in effective spiritual practitioners. Like I said, we'll talk about motherhood, entrepreneurship, finding our identity after divorce, and so much more. Sobriety, healing, all the things. Hi, Krista.
Hi, Katie. Thanks for having me. It's such a joy to be with you. You're also
Yeah.
such a bright light, and it's so great to connect with you over Instagram and then with your community. And I'm a big fan of all of the messages you share, all of the books, all of the things. So it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, the books. I know. Sharing those books. That's what I've been getting a lot of feedback from the book sharing, and it is fun. I love that. So yes, I'm so happy you're here. And I always love just kicking off our conversation with a little bit about your journey to entrepreneurship and your business creation. I feel like that will really unlock a lot of our conversation in so many directions because of what led you to entrepreneurship, how that fits in with your role as mother, your own sobriety and healing journey. So kick us off just saying like what led you to Christa Diaz Consulting?
Okay. Wow, what a it's like which entry point do I want to go into to today? Um, so really kind of like the long-winded story in a short-winded way is that I grew up down south, went to school. I checked all of the societal boxes. I went to college, I did the things, I got the degree. Within like 2 or 3 days after walking across stage and graduating, I immediately started a job in technology. It was in the sales part first. So I took a sales job and was almost immediately miserable. I remember very vividly sitting down at a desk, like maybe 30 days into this, and just calling my dad, who was like very well off in the technology space, was a very big to do architect, but he was not on the sales side. I remember calling him like on a lunch break and I was in tears and I was bored beyond belief that I couldn't fathom um, really along. I was like, how is this sustainable? It was like I could just see my younger self trying to make sense of like, how is this going to be the rest of my life? Fast forward, I was pretty successful pretty quickly. I took a sales job, which turned into a consulting services job at my next opportunity, and I was contracted up here in Boston with Oracle. I did a lot of consulting services work, product management, project management, supported like the entire East Coast for Boston with a partner. Met my husband at the time, got pregnant. Well, we got married, we bought a house, we had kids. He's also in technology. So when we had kids, I decided to stay home. Um, Pretty quickly, I would say, after having my second daughter, I realized that I definitely wanted to be working and making a contribution, but was really not sure about how to go back into technology. I spent 7 years in the spiritual space after that moment, realizing I wanted to work, but I just didn't really know what that looked like. So I started my healing journey. It was like that moment of realizing, like, okay, being a stay-at-home mom is really beautiful. Like, I'm so fortunate to be afforded this opportunity. I also feel like I have so much to give, but I had no idea who I was and what I wanted to give. And it was really that moment that started this 7 year kind of like heroes seekers journey of exploring really the healing arts of any kind. I've participated in probably 75 different healing modalities at this point in time. Well, I think the takeaway was that I was really devoted to finding my purpose and to discovering who I was. Like, how could I answer the question of who am I without my elevator pitch or rattling off my resume? And that's kind of how it all started and came together for me in regards to starting my business. It's like as soon as I discovered who I was and that I needed to be doing something that was much larger in regards to contribution, I was like, okay, I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to invest in myself in this way, and I'm going to use all of my experience from my consulting work in the past, and I'm just going to apply it to a community that was really special and near and dear to my heart, and see if I can help them stand in service in a way that really delivers. And that's how Christa Diaz Consulting was started.
Yeah. Oh, there is definitely a few themes where I was like, oh, we got to talk about that. And one that stands out to me right off the bat is this juxtaposition of motherhood as a full-time job, but also wanting some semblance of meaning, purpose, and contribution to the world outside of it and an identity outside of motherhood. And it's interesting because so many women, I think, feel like they have to decide between full-time stay-at-home mom, full-time work, and you have to sacrifice one or the other. And that's something that I really, in my own journey into motherhood, thought about a lot because I was working full-time health coaching and left that job to pursue my business alongside motherhood and felt like, okay, this is what I want to be doing. But I feel like a lot of women probably really feel like resonate with that because being a full-time mom is exhausting, and I could totally see how not having some outlet for our own kind of meaning and purpose and identity can feel stifling, at least for me personally. But I also can't imagine like going to a full-time job outside the home with a small child and feeling like fulfilled by that either. And so that's why personally I felt so compelled to formulate something different in the middle and just seemed only natural to pursue my business that was kind of on the side anyways. Um, so yeah, I would love to hear more about your thoughts of that and on that. And just, I'm also noticing too this emergence of more women creating businesses and getting creative with their role as mother and contributor to the world looks like. Not that mothering is not a contribution to the world because it is like one of the greatest ones you can have, but just weaving in that separate element of purpose and meaning and creating your own harmonious version of how am I contributing outside of motherhood, and that it doesn't have to be this push and pull between stay-at-home mom full-time and full-time work. And what are your thoughts on the emerging landscape of an in-between
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, part-time work, creative endeavors, side hustles?
So I love to see it. It feels like that there's a movement. And really for me, it was, there was a dissonance and in my internal drive. Really, it was the discovery of the creative power that lives inside of me that was laying dormant for
Mm.
the majority of my life, but certainly in my career. That was an inaccessible place for me in my career space. So the suppression I experienced in my career of that creative fire that you're talking about with like people wanting to do side hustles or like merge the identity of motherhood and entrepreneur and creating like these hybrid roles. I really think it's like a reclamation of this creative energy that we all possess. And I think we're at a really interesting, beautiful time where we're all talking about it, right? We don't need to convince people that this exists anymore. It's known and we're talking about it and we see our friends and our and the internet doing it. And so, you know, in 2020 that wasn't the case though. So it was really hard for me at first. There was a ton of dissonance in my internal experience and what was expected of me from being a stay-at-home mom and this like deep knowing that I wanted to contribute, yes, to motherhood, but also something greater in the community because I believed at the time, and I still believe that it informs my motherhood. Like participating in my true calling and what I feel I was meant to be here doing, aligned with my creative energy to do so directly impacts my ability to stand in motherhood. Like they're not separate from me anymore at all. And I actually don't think that they ever were. I believe that me having children's two daughters was initiation of sorts to waking up to this knowing inside of myself. So at first it felt really scary and really hard, especially being in like affluent suburb area where a lot of mothers, stay-at-home mothers, were like really content with the role. And it was like I started to internalize why I was having questions and other motivations and other desires and other drives. And I really thought for a long time that maybe something was broken or wrong with me because I wasn't like fully satiated with just staying at home. Like
Mm.
I was so grateful for the opportunity, but I was like looking at these two little girls being like, I'm 32 years old, 33. I have so much to give you, and I have some other pathways to do that. And that was kind of how I arrived at it. I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yes, you really did. That element, and that's something that I definitely resonate with heavily, is that we all have a desire and an innate kind of drive to express our creativity. And when we're not doing that, whether we can't quite access it in the way we want to within motherhood, or which some people can, and everyone's different, that's beautiful. And or maybe we can't, it's being really stifled in our career. Um, and I think a lot of society and the traditional conventional paths we're sort of groomed to take can allow us to sort of abandon creativity as more of a negotiable or kind of a luxury. And I believe that's what leads to a lot of our unhappiness in society, is taking these paths that we're told is the right one, and we feel like something's missing all along the way, and it's because we are disconnected to that creative expression. And what you said stood out to me so much too, about that informs motherhood and allows for us to be this more multifaceted and fulfilled version of ourself. And for me, creativity is just such a fuel and such a way to access life force, that's like that vibrancy translates to motherhood, and that aliveness that I'm generating within myself by honoring my creative expression through entrepreneurship absolutely impacts my motherhood in the most beneficial ways possible. I think it allows me to be more connected to myself, more lit up by life. And there's no doubt that Arthur and your daughters are impacted positively by a mother who's passionate about the life she's creating. So I think that's just so important. And truly, I feel that we kind of like look at creativity as it is like, oh, that's nice. It's like, no, that's why we're all dying inside and miserable, because it's
yes.
not nice. It's necessary.
Yes, and I'm like a total I have found a home in that camp where to me standing in creation actually was a very large and second part of my healing journey. It was switching and psychologically switching out of that chaotic, frenetic, monkey-minded energy into this fullness, this robustness, this expansion that is creation. And it really is like a brain flip to get into this space and to like move this energy for me. It's not, it's so funny. When I first started, I was like, I'm not an artist. Like, I don't know how to paint.
Same.
I'm like, I can't watercolor. I can't sketch. Like, I'm not a graphic designer or a photographer. I'm like, I can't art. I can't create. And it's like, no, absolutely not. This isn't, it's because I feel like, at least for me growing up, like I viewed art or the arts as like a hobby, like this
Yeah.
side project, this like, it was only for the people who were super passionate and had the time to pursue such a thing. And it's like, no, actually, not at all. I don't even think it's something that's just for the feminine. I think it's truly a human like power channel that we've all somehow forgotten. And I do believe, and there's tons of science and books and all the things, as you know, that supports that this has led to like a complete severance of self in our society and really leads to a lot of pathologies and like mental disorders and pain and
Self-medication.
yeah, and coping and numbing. It's like there's no way to move that energy. And when you don't, and that creative energy just sits inside you, it's the same thing as trauma or toxicity. It just festers, it sits and you get angry and resentful and you start to view art as like to me it was like, how dare they? Because I couldn't
Yeah.
get it, you know?
Exactly, which is why I, to be honest, think that there is this like triggering element of social media, and I think it's a pretty common phenomenon that people will talk about when they start sharing on social media and putting themselves out there. They're very surprised to see that strangers support them, but maybe people at closer to them, friends, family, don't. And I think a big part of it is that we've all stifled our creativity, and it's quite triggering to see someone openly tap into something you've been confined into a box thinking, that's not what we're supposed to do in adulthood, or taking yourself less seriously, having the audacity to put yourself out there online and expect to make money doing it. All of those things are things that people have been conditioned out of. And I notice even people will say stuff like, oh, you'll have to get a real job if you aren't like on social media. It's like, why have we looked at like creating a business on social media, tapping into our creativity, tapping into our abundance that we can access through visibility and having the courage to put ourselves out there? Why is that somehow lesser than selling your life to a corporation?
Yes, it's
Why is
because
that looked down upon? And why is it okay to not support your friends like building a business on social media? Whereas if I didn't congratulate someone and I pretended that their job promotion didn't exist at a dinner and was like, "Oh, you just got a promotion at your conglomerate tech like company that's taking over the world with AI," like we all clap for that. But if somebody's on social media crushing it, it's like, "Oh yeah, whatever." And I think like even that societal programming just shows that we do not give creativity or people having the courage to chase entrepreneurship or break free of the boxes. It's like we clap for people who are succeeding the way that we're told to succeed. But the people who are breaking free of boxes and succeeding in ways that challenge our programming, it scares people and they don't like it so much.
well, it's like when I mean, there's God, this is like one of my favorite topics. This is really alive for me, and I can't help not see it, through the lens of psychological development right now. And it's like it's glaringly obvious, but it's so hidden in plain sight because a lot of it's conventional thinking versus post-conventional thinking, really, is what like principle stands out to me. But from like my own experience of this, like in my own personal life and community, is like that really held me back like so for so long. It was just like it's perceived as being fringe, as being like lost, like, and like I think the artists and like writers and all of these pioneers before us experienced this in such depth and like intensity first. And it's like, you go to a dinner and you hear about someone writing a book or making art and we don't celebrate them. We don't ask them about their process or what it's like. What are your breakthroughs like? Like how does it feel to be in that position and stand and look at something with completion and then have the freaking balls to be witnessed in it too, and we're not applaud where there's no applause here. And then I look at, you're right, with like our friends who are like they got a promotion and they're like big conglomerate and or they're killing it in some finance job or whatever, and we all need to celebrate and clap and be like, wow, that's so incredible. And to me, I'm like, but where's the contribution to the greater whole, like outside of your individual family unit? And it's like, it's
Seems
so,
backwards
yeah,
sometimes.
it's, or just unbalanced, like to
Yes.
me. And it's like, I realized that in starting to like take my own voice and just be like, you know what? Okay, I'm going to pursue this. I have to express myself here online. And like, Cringe Mountain is a real place and you have to really climb it and you have to go through it. And what was really painful for me was to see the people closest to me, like friends or family,
They let you die on cringe goddamn mountain
they
up
let you
there.
they let you die on Cringe Mountain. Like you can see them view it
You're
and
like, you are really exposing yourself right now. Like truly.
you're showing your hand. It's
And that's also so weird to me how normalized it is to watch and lurk and know that the person can see you watching and lurking.
no,
And
like
then you see them in real life, you pretend you don't. It's like this whole like ways we've normalized interacting based on social media. I'm like, it is so weird. And it's like it's people calling it out hasn't caught up to the unusual behavior. Like it's starting to, and people are saying like that's weird behavior to like lurk and not support. Either like lurk and support, or just if it's not for you, don't lurk. But the fact that people know that you're doing it, I think it's this weird behavior that like people get away with just because social media and the landscape of how to deal with all the dynamics of it is relatively new, over the past like decade, right? And I just feel like people's etiquette and having normal like etiquette around it is not caught up to like the act of using social media to view, to create, whatever. And so
but I
it's
also
funny to me.
they know better. It's like, you know what I mean? It's one button, you know how to use social media, you know how to engage. And like to me, it's like, would you go to someone's talent show and see them on stage and sit in the audience and not clap? Like that, like, I have like a couple like like really close family members. And you're like, to me, that's the same metaphor of you coming to see me perform something and just silently sitting in the audience when the show is over. Like there's
Yeah,
something, it's like the etiquette, that's weird behavior. I
it's
think weird
weirdo
behavior. I
behavior.
think it's very unusual, weird, peculiar
Yeah,
behavior.
and it's like even though it's normal, like I just have had to over the years, in the beginning it used to really bother me and I would be like, "Oh, I feel like I can't even be bothered by this," because then they're gonna be like, "Oh, what, you notice that?" and like you pay attention to that. It's like, yeah, anyone creating a fucking business from scratch when they have two followers is gonna notice if like their best friends are watching and not liking anything or being supportive. And it used to definitely make me feel like something was wrong with me for caring. But then in reality, as I like pursued on my path and met other people who are super uplifting and supportive, I'm like, no, I'm not fucking weird for noticing. Like, that is so weird to like stalk someone who you say is your friend. And these people are like actively trying to hang out with me when I'm around. And it's like, you're pursuing a friendship with me. You've literally asked me why we're not as close. These things where it's like, are you not putting this together that I've created a business on social media you've never supported and you pretend it doesn't exist? Like there's going to be some layer of disconnect in our relationship moving forward if you can't acknowledge like a huge part of me. And this isn't like my job, I work for whatever XYZ company. This is like my own business I've created from the my heart, soul, the inner workings of my mind. It's not like me supporting someone working at, you know, uh AT&T or like some random company that they, it's like these are I am sharing the inner landscape of my being here through this business. And so if you want to pretend that doesn't exist, like it's going to limit the quality of our relationship. For
Yeah, and I think it, and I like, and it to me, it's like there's some grief when that happens. Like, especially if I'm having to like field a call and like celebrate a big moment for like a family member or whatever, and they've gone out of the way to, because you have to go out of your way to ignore something at that level. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like if they're, especially if they're involved in your life and they've seen you've created this from you have to go out of your way to pretend it doesn't exist. And to me,
which is
that's like
yeah.
psycho, that's like sociopathic behavior. Like, do you know what I mean? Like to
Yeah.
do everything but the one thing. And like, there's, even someone really close to my life where I've like texted like, oh yeah, I'm really, doing this for work and I'm lost in studying. And it's just, there's purposely not acknowledging it. And you're like, I've gotten to a place where I'm like, oh, there's nothing wrong here. Like that's there's something happening there. I think it starts to it's so unfamiliar, I think, for some of those older relationships to even conceptualize doing something that like what we're doing, that if they were to ask about it, maybe I don't know. I'm just feeling like it would mean something about who they are, and they're really unwilling to look at it because there's just a few individuals in my life that I'm experiencing this with, and they seem to have like something they're holding on to.
Like a real like they refuse. And it
It's a
was funny because
refusal,
in
it's a
the book,
resistance. It's
yeah, a resistance to
to
acknowledge.
acknowledging, yeah.
What I've noticed is early on, it was like more of my partying friends that I'm not as close with anymore. No hard feelings, which is like different strokes for different folks. Like we've taken different life paths. And I noticed that was like a big, um, I just think it was hard for them to see me in the new light of the way I was going. And I feel that it used to really bother me, but I do find that in some of the more like obvious examples where I see it and it's like, wow, this is like so glaring. It's embarrassing for you how glaring it is. And I have taken a step back and when I've noticed like getting resentful or getting triggered and then I remove that. I'm like, look at this person's life, okay? And so there's one example I think of where this particular person continues to bring up, you should start a social media business, like helping people build their businesses on social media. And meanwhile, this person does not like any of my posts, never acknowledges my social media that I built for my own business I'm passionate about, that is financially lucrative. And it's just like, but then, and it used to bother me, like this person keeps saying this without acknowledging the very successful business I built for myself and the social media skills I had to gain to build my own business that you won't acknowledge. But you are saying, like, the mental gymnastics here is wild that you are still not acknowledging my own business while telling me to build another business rooted in the skills I've created and gained from my own business that's successful. And so I just am like, okay, I can't, this is crazy. But then taking a step back, I'm like, okay, this person has always had the mentality of like, work is work, money is money, you need to make money, very disconnected from their emotions, very, I don't think has ever been to therapy. So I'm like, realistically speaking, this person is not comfortable with the context of my work
Mhm.
talking about their feelings, like the fact that I'm doing women's circles in a year talking about our feelings is probably not something this person would be comfortable talking about. They're very focused on money. They don't have the understanding that like passion and financial abundance can coexist with creativity. It doesn't have to be all sacrifice for money. And so they're literally like vocalizing their limitations by the suggestions they're giving me. And it really doesn't have anything to do with me, but it still fucking pisses me off.
Oh yeah, and it's allowed to, right? And it's like I arrived at this, and also it definitely pisses me off too. And I think that's totally okay. Like sometimes I get so frustrated or irritated with the spiritual community because it's like, how dare we energetically feel irritated or agitated or frustrated or just potentially disgruntled with how we're being perceived, witnessed, or celebrated. And it's like, absolutely not. We're still humans with full whole souls. And like the contributions and the way that we garner taking care of our families financially is up to us. And like the agency that I own and operate to do such a thing speaks to who I am. And because I want to operate in this post-conventional way of pursuing this, doesn't mean that I'm like broken or less than or whatever. I've realized that now I've just kind of gotten to this place where I'm like, you know what? Who is in my front row? Like, who really is here? Who wants to be here? Who shares meaning with me in exactly what I'm doing? And I've gotten more conscious about who I want in the front row too. It's like, I'm putting, or I've just been so blessed in some of these communities that I've gone in to work with and heal myself and whatever. And I've made lifelong friends now. And it's like, it's because we have a shared meaning, our share, the way we view contributing to the world and aligning our souls and hearts and minds to do so. There's a shared meaning there that bonds us. And it's like, I would much rather have those individuals in my front row who are actually listening to what I have to say when I have the balls to say it and they find resonance. And not only do they find resonance, they break out their phone and they pull up the little keyboard and they type a little something to encourage you, or they send you a message telling you, like, sorry about that. Thank you so much. Your message made a difference. And it's like, that's what I'm doing it for. I'm not doing it for like this, like Karen in the background who is not even woken up to their own potential. So, of course, they're not going to recognize mine, you know?
I
And
love that.
so,
Of course, they're not going to recognize your potential if they haven't woken up to their own is such a good piece to ground into and to remember. And I think what you're speaking to and just focusing on, the people you are impacting, the people you do resonate with, and know like if that person did resonate with what I was saying, I probably wouldn't be where I want to be. That person that you're so frustrated about judging, or, the person you're so frustrated about not understanding you. It's like, do I want that person to get my message? Looking at their life and where they are, and not in a judgmental way at all, just in a like, who do I want my message to resonate with? And use that as the guidepost as opposed to getting frustrated by the people who it's not.
yeah.
That's so good. And you talked about the spiritual community a little bit, and I know that your experience in the spiritual community kind of impacted the development of your business. So, can you share a little bit about what you found were some of the shortcomings in the spiritual community and how that wove into Christa Diaz Consulting?
Yeah. So I'm a post-conventional thinker, right? I realized this, and it was a realization that came later, but I say that because once I realized that I was missing something, which I think is how a lot of journeys begin, is this realization that, okay, I've done a lot of what society projected onto me. I would be happy. And when I hit all of these boxes and I felt this deep hole inside of me, I was really unwilling to pursue conventional systems to approach unpacking that within myself. Like I had already been a part of the conventional systems. I had was diagnosed with postpartum depression. I was on antidepressants and I lost myself. I actually almost completely lost my life under that model. And, a complete severance of self with no real medical attention to what was going on with me as a person. And once I realized that I was, you know, that wasn't it for me, I pursued everything alternative. So I literally flushed all site like antidepressants, whatever it was. I was just like, I'm not doing this. I'm not living this way anymore. And I entered this spiritual, the only resource available to me at the time, which was 2020, um, was the spiritual community. So my entry point to that was learning about the DSM and the diagnosing just model itself, and it was enraging for me. Once I discovered how that thing was built and how things went down in that model, I felt extremely mishandled, and it lit this fire to like do something about it. At the time, I had no idea what to do about it. So I just entered the space. And so I was doing holistic psychotherapy. I was doing like the sound bowls, the crystals, the healings, the what is that? Like the teepees that you get really hot in. Like, I mean, I was trying it all, plant medicine, whatever it may be. I mean, I was literally in pain. I had realized that the childhood I had was very limited, and there was a lot of pain and suffering and pieces of me fragmented in that. And I knew I needed to do some healing, but I had no idea how to do that. Um, so I went on this journey, and it took me about 7 years to fill this hole inside of me. And I had to kiss a lot of frogs. That's like the nicest way I can say my initial experience in the spiritual community was not good. I really struggled to find a lot of ground in that space. So for things to make sense to me was really hard. It was very ambiguous, very vague, a lot of gray, a lot of fantastical ideas of what's possible to us. And great wisdom teachings that I think had delineated so far from lineage. And, my experience wasn't always like I didn't feel safe enough in these disordered environments to actually anchor into something real to heal myself. Looking back, I did have a lot of experiences that really opened my mind and were really beautiful. And I really got to learn a lot through discernment. But the place that I arrived at ultimately was I discovered this one piece that I was missing in the beginning of this past year. And it was, I had always been looking for a map. I was like, this feels like there's a protocol, there's a process to this. And I could not locate this for years. And then I discovered psychological development. And when I discovered it, it was a moment that you read about a lot in spiritual text. It was like all of the light bulbs went on, everything made sense. It was like years of confusion cleared, the path was made clear, everything started to like literally clear up and make sense. And it was through this lens that I started to realize and really kind of honor all of the sensations and internal experiences I had all along the way were true and real and valid, and not some spiritual French practitioner being like, nope, your concerns aren't real. Go back that shadow, do the work. And it was like, no, I was having really real concerns all along about the validity of what I was experiencing because of how unfounded and ungrounded a lot of these services can be. And I wasn't wrong. I was just feeling things in my internal system that were threats and dangers. And once I finally kind of woke up to that, I realized that the spiritual community at large means well, that a lot of these service providers really do want to help,
Mhm.
but that they can't see what they can't see. And it's the cliche of like, they can only take you as far as they've gone themselves. And it's
Mhm.
realizing that um, the intention to serve is beautiful, but without the competency, the ethics, and the integrity to serve, you're a part of a systemic problem that is extracting from others pain and suffering more than you are of contribution to real change and transformation. And
Yeah.
it's in this realization that I built my business to really help ground some of these services so we can move clients through their pain and suffering and show transformation and show impact and point them into the direction of like what's next,
Mhm.
because we can't own the whole vertical stack of healing as spiritual service providers, although a lot of us claim to.
Yeah.
It's not really like that. It's like you're good at serving your zone of genius, and unless you've done a ton of work to develop your competency around that, they don't even know how limited they are in it.
Wow.
So I'm the kind of client that like I need more. I move quickly. So I just would move on so quickly. And then if I did, I would get you're in just a lot of like narrative things that were not beneficial to my healing. So,
Yeah. So, I totally uh, really appreciate what you're saying about the like people can only go as far as they've gone themselves and like guide you as far as they've gone themselves. And I also find too is just, being in real integrity with what you're doing and walking the talk and being able to show up. Like, I think that to me was what led me to stop drinking in the first place. But the more I've gone on, the more I see that that's not like a priority for every practitioner, whether it's in the healing space or the medical space or the mental health space. Like, and I think that element of discernment is so important because we think, especially even when we're handing ourselves over to a doctor or to a therapist or to a life coach, health coach, spiritual development, it's like, I think, and we talked about this on one of my last podcasts about this balance of inner and outer authority, that just because we're going to a practitioner doesn't mean that there's no like inner authority necessary to really like even if someone's a great practitioner of whatever kind, doesn't mean that they'll resonate with you specifically. And so, really practicing our like participation in the therapeutic process and not just being like, oh, this is a professional. Like, I feel like we've started to relinquish that hold on like the authorities on this or that and recognize like somebody can have 10 years of education and be a medically trained doctor and they are not healthy at all. They do not maintain their competence in the evolving literature. They're not challenging anything they're seeing. And so, what does that mean? You go to a doctor and think that they have everything you need. And that's like, we kind of go into things expecting that we can hand over our authority and like not have discernment. And then on top of that, the spiritual space really doesn't have any bar of entry or like regulation or credentialing, which is, on one hand, I think I'm like, yeah, I do think we've like really given a lot of credence to credentials and there's a lot of life experience, but not everyone walks in their integrity. And so it's like finding that
mhm.
balance between having the educational background, being in your integrity and alignment, and then also clients doing their due diligence in terms of like, does this feel like an aligned relationship? Is this like practitioner meeting me where I'm at on my journey? So it's like a little bit of all of that. And
Mhm.
then I was curious, like what I would love to hear more specifics about, like an experience where you were like, okay, this felt very like ungrounding, or I feel like this practitioner didn't necessarily measure up to like what they're saying they're doing. Like, what's an experience that left you feeling a little bit disillusioned?
So too, like I think like for some context, it's like for me, I realized that like what was happening in the spiritual community was almost like running a parallel system to the discrepancies that was going on conventionally, like the credential aspect. Like I feel like I have to talk about that a little bit more because it's such like a linchpin for how I started was like yes, like we are allowed to be in opposition to over credentialing ourselves, and like the fact that that's the way that that system was structured didn't always make doctors or whomever was in it stand in like credible ethical service. Like I totally get that, but when we switch over to the spiritual community and a lot of us arrive here in opposition to the conventional system, it's like yeah, I understand we don't want to credential, but in place of credential, we need to have competency. Like we can't just like, oh, it's the Wild
Free for
West.
all, yeah.
Everybody's throwing crystals and the wide brim hats and everybody's on linen and it's the feathers and it's the beating of the drums and it's just it's you walk in here and you're like, whoa. I
Mhm.
think there's the novelty of the new circus and you're like, wow, but
Yeah.
it's still a circus. You're like, it's the same thing. And so it's like I don't think that there'll be like a way to credential the spiritual community at large, but like my vision and my dream is to come in and to just talk about the importance of apprenticeship, of like discovering the way you want to be in service and then finding those in the fields before you and getting underneath them in a way that you can intimately know a material and you're afforded the opportunity to reimagine, reinvent, repackage, and reservice something outside of its silo. Like, yeah, you don't need to credential yourself, but you do need to follow some sort of developmental path of competency. And I just
Yeah.
have to say that is like what I mean by all of this is like I love the spiritual community. I think instead of saying that it was a negative experience, what I walked away understanding is that there was so much more on the table that was possible and that we could be seen as a real alternative healing modality as a community if we all just kind of took it a little bit more serious and grew up and stopped kind of running around like a circus. And so, yeah. And now for an experience that I will say where I experienced some kind of like disappointment is really what it is overall, is like, and while trying to protect everybody, is that a more recent thing is that I was really in love with my mentorship and I'm still really in love with like the that type of service as well. It was realizing or just kind of understanding like, and this is for like anybody who's pursuing any kind of like guiding or facilitating or mentorship, is like I had to understand myself in such a way that I had to realize when I hit someone else's belief system and it doesn't align with mine, what does that mean for me? So it was like less about the service practitioner being like out of alignment or out of integrity or anything like that. It was really like the service was so beautiful and it served such a beautiful purpose for this one job for me. But once that was met, it was like a realization that like, okay, their skill set had served this need, but now I need something else. And there was just like this like moment of what do I do about this? Like what, how do I, are they gonna realize this as like leaders and say like, oh, you might need something else? Or am I gonna have to,
Met with ego.
yeah. And so like it's a unique dance and like I love them and I have so much respect and reverence for what they do in a particular area of the healing protocol. But once I had moved outside of that, it's like I'm tired of having to be the one that advocates and realizes these things first. It would be so beautiful if a practitioner could be like, oh, you've reached our zone of genius here, and like, here's a really next beautiful resource that's available to continue your growth. And I
Yes.
haven't had that experience yet in the spiritual space, but I have had it in like therapy and with a spiritual advisor. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's possible in more mature rooms, but I haven't had a very personal experience with it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. No, I think there's something really um like validating or impressive about somebody who knows their growth edge, like their limits, and can be. I think that there's an element of trust building when someone can say, like, I've given you everything I can give you, and I think these would be some amazing like places to search for your next stage of evolution and growth instead of like, all right, let's milk this for as long as we can, like you've clearly outgrown me. But um, when do they say when the student surpasses the teacher or something like that?
And
Knowing when that moment has happened and like ushering someone on to their next stage. And I do think there is a lot of like ego in the spiritual community and that as well. And just I always say too, because obviously doing the yurt and it's like evolved into this very like woo-woo thing, but I really try when people come to be like, this is supposed to be, I know that we're in a yurt and all, but it's supposed to be down to earth and approachable spirituality because I think we all have spiritual health that needs tending to, and making it accessible and not quite like the stereotypical version that we see of woo woo, or I know woo woo is not necessarily the most appropriate term, but that sort of version of spirituality that maybe people see as like a little less grounded and a little more fringe, when in reality, I love what you're doing because I feel like it is integrating spiritual health and well-being. It's like putting it on a map in a more tangible way, as opposed to like this outside thing that's kind of a, oh, that must be nice for a bunch of like white ladies and like linen and hats to be playing with their crystals. It's like, no, we all have spirits and spiritual health and this access to creativity and continued evolution and deeper meaning and purpose and interconnection to each other and God. Like, there's ways we can go about this in a structured,
Yeah.
kind of tangible, result oriented way, that gives it a little bit more structure and makes it more readily available and enticing to people like across the board, you know?
Yeah, like I was less, I guess when I was thinking about like this this drive to be in service, it was clear to me rather early on in my exploration of the spiritual community that this was not palatable to Gen Pop. I was like, oh, I see why they're in a subcategory because like it to me it like it isolated spirituality. Like you almost had to come in and you had to assimilate into the codex and the shared meaning of what all of this was, this mystifying potential.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like it was like, well, if I can't understand what you're saying, how can I integrate it? And like
Yeah.
I really I couldn't get past that until I realized that like spirituality was less about waiting for the spontaneity of the event for me. It was like it was something tangible that I was interested in pursuing, and I wanted to do that in a devotional, grounded, guided way, like because like there's this safety component to this that is missing sometimes in these environments, that like expansion is possible if the individual feels rooted and safe in the environment to explore that expansion. And I think the energetics of some of the spaces that these things go down, it's like the container isn't held and the things aren't structured and the environment wasn't done and the language wasn't shared. And there was like all of these key pieces missing that I just kept walking away being like, what was that? Like,
Yeah.
what the hell was that? And then you look around and you've got, there's the other people who are like jazzed on it. And then it creates this like dissonance in your experience that led to more confusion than integration. And it was like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. I was like, spirituality is such a key component to development. Like the two go together. You can't just wake up and not grow up, and I saw the spiritual community doing a lot of waking up or having one very peak waking up experience that feels super complete. And then that's it. But really, there's this entire aspect of growing up that I felt was obviously, now that I've discovered it, very much missing here.
Yeah.
I realized that just because someone had had a peak waking up experience as a service provider, that it actually was not enough to sustain for the clients. And so, copy maybe.
Yeah.
I realized that they can't see it. Like, and especially as I got further into the research, it's like the spiritual community just can't see it. They can't see that just the spiritual isn't enough of an experience to sustain, like that there is an actual developmental thing happening in part with spirituality. And if you can understand the both, then you're much more fruitful in healing yourself, expanding, finding what you need. And really, what I think is most important in all spiritual endeavors is like integrating that into your life and like being able to go up this big spiritual mountain, but then bring it back down to the village as like a boon, as an offering, as like wisdom that you can give forward and bring forward to someone else. Like it's not enough to just have these big spiritual experiences and just like stay here. It's like no
Yeah.
one needs you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of reminds me of things I've seen, about people doing just psychedelics and stuff like that, and there's no integration. It's like, yeah, that's great, but how are you living the other 99% of your life? And the word devotional practices stood out to me about what you were saying, and just it's beautiful to create these experiences for people to like drop into spirituality and to get like this concentrated dose of community and spirituality and um whatnot. But it's like if we aren't then also going back to our day-to-day lives and weaving those practices and belief systems and into our day-to-days, like that's where the real spirituality happens. And I think it's kind of like that immediate gratification, that big like dose of dopamine is like the like events and the things and the circles and the ayahuasca. But it's like that's great, but if we're all kind of like seeking it as still this immediate escape instead of like our day-to-day, how am I living my life, how am I developing this element of who I am outside of these as well. Yeah, I think there's so many layers to it. And I wanted to ask too, the when you said that you found psychological development alongside like spiritual development, and that really gave you this framework of actively pursuing spiritual development in a tangible way. And it's my understanding of what you're saying. And would you mind sharing a little bit about that and like what books, if people were interested in finding books on this topic and being like, I want to provide myself some more structure for spiritual exploration and deepened understanding of how to like evolve through these stages, where would you suggest people start in terms of the books that have been really enlightening for you?
Gosh. Well,
Or like
there's
models or
yeah,
anything.
okay, like book. I'll do books at the end. So like psychological development really is like it's a discovery that's rather recent in the sense that it's really only like the last 100 years or so that we as psychologists, as humans, have really understood that there is an evolution process that is happening with us. Like as mothers, we understand this because when we first have our babies, some of us use apps like that show us the development of the child.
Hmm.
Okay, so psychologically, this still unfolds throughout our entire lives, right? And I think the spiritual community, the draw to the spiritual community is because that was our closest explanation of the evolution that is the self, right? And I think that psychological development and understanding that we go through this process of perspective taking and the complexity of differentiation and individuation and all of these beautiful things that happen. It's like locating this and locating myself within this framework changed my life because it allowed me to move away from the ambiguity and the vagueness that was a spiritual explanation of the events that unfolded inside of me. And it actually allowed me to understand myself in a really safe, grounded, and anchored way. Like this had been researched for decades, and there were hundreds of developmental models out there that but we just don't talk, no one's talking about them yet. And so once I discovered it, within 24 hours, went and got psychologically evaluated formally. And I mean, the rest is history. I now work with them and I'm dedicated to this apprenticeship process probably for the next few years. And who knows, I might even now that I'm in it, pursue like PhD, master's, all of that, because it's
Mhm.
that incredible and important for me. And some of the books that really helped me clarify what this framework was. And like the best way I can describe it is this like understanding yourself from a developmental standpoint is like having the meta map to your unfolding. Like it's like, you're going to go on a trip for the rest of your life. Would you like to do that blindfolded in the passenger seat with zero agency? Or would you like to do that with your eyes open and your hand on the wheel and the map in the seat? And that's what psychological development is like understanding exactly where you are in the unfolding process of your evolution. And that
Mhm.
is like understanding what parts are online, like how I relate to the world, what perspective am I taking? Like the perspective that you take on yourself in the world is directly correlated to absolutely everything you do, including creation. Meaning, if you're stuck in like a second person perspective, you're only creating and solving problems from a second person perspective, which means your services are limited and those in which you serve are very limited too.
Mm,
So, if anybody is interested in understanding themselves in this way, which I think, is the drive in a lot of spiritual pursuits too, is to know thyself, right?
mm,
Um, and really the point of individuation, all of this is to become more whole, right? Like we sit down to meditate, not to become more fragmented. We sit down to become more whole. And so that's what psychological development has done for me is a map where I can see where I am, go pick up all the pieces from where I've been, make myself more whole, and now I have a template for where I'm going. And now I'm structured and oriented in a way, and like no more like this pain and suffering of this whole process is just gone now. And so I highly recommend it. I'm going to spend probably the better part of the rest of my life teaching it.
mhm,
Um, and some books to start with, like Radical Wholeness by Ken Wilber. He's fascinating. He's a very fascinating human. I'm actually in his curriculum right now. But what Ken has done is he has looked at all human development models, all of them, and
mhm.
he's found patterns across them all, and he breaks them all down into 5 buckets: waking up, growing up, cleaning up, opening up, and showing up. And so he puts all the therapies and the disciplines within each of these protocols, and he shares it all. And the book is called Radical Wholeness. And I think he's got over 100 books, but that one is a great place to start because it's just going to give you all of the developmental models pared down in a really digestible way.
And so then when you're talking about psychological development, there's not like a specific sort of formula that you're speaking to. It's like extrapolate, like exploring and kind of condensing like all that is known on psychological development through the different models of different therapists and like sort of collectively putting that together in terms of like what does the overarching like literature say on like the phases we move through in evolution as through the lens of psychological development, and how does that provide us a better understanding of where we are in terms of our spiritual evolution as well.
So I actually work with a very specific model called the stages matrix, which is the most comprehensive model currently that is in the comprehensive meaning that it is the most research done on later stages of development, which is why I chose it because I myself am in the later stages of development. So there's very little work to explain what's going on inside of me. So I chose that one in particular, and she's built off of like 3 major frameworks within it. But I like the stages matrix because it's exactly what you said. It's broken down on phases and cycles, transformation cycles that you can actually locate yourself, your parts, your narrative, your internal learning through this stages matrix. And I actually got formally evaluated through them as well.
That
And
one. Okay, got it.
yeah, if anybody's interested, it's stagesinternational.com, and the doctor is Dr. Terry O'Fallon. She's 86 years old. She's an absolute wizard. She's a triple PhD, and she does this apprenticeship with um, high level professors and people in the space, and she does it with a spiritual leader, and her name is Kimberly, and I can't remember her last name right now, but those two are who I'm in this apprenticeship with.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's really
So
cool.
with the stages matrix, you said she uses three. Does she, you said three, I think? Three.
So it's 6 stages.
Mhm.
Um, and there's half steps included, so it's really a 12-part process. And but really like the last 2 stages are like less than 0.01%. So it's like,
Jesus and Buddha.
yeah, and like you can have these experiences, but really what Terry and what the stages matrix and what psychological
There
development,
you are most consistently.
it's understanding that it's not a vertical ladder, that it's actually nesting circles, and like you're within one stage, like, from a baby to toddler to adolescence to young adulthood to mature adulthood. And the idea isn't to like just go to one. You actually can't just go to one. It's to fill in as much of the self within each stage that you become more whole. So
Yes.
Psychological development is housed within something called vertical development, which is housed within cognitive science. So it's the development of cognitive capacity through perspective taking. And I know that's a lot of words squished together, but it's just if you can think about it like this, it's like it's a layering of capabilities. Like you first you're a baby, you can't move, then you can crawl, then you can walk, then you can run. And
Yeah.
if you can
That
run,
makes so much sense, like nesting circles, filling
yeah.
in the nesting circles. Like you will expand. It's kind of like the same visual as our comfort zone is you expand outside your comfort zone and then your discomfort zone is outside that. Like it's just you kind of fill it in slowly and it doesn't happen all at once and it's not going to be a full solid circle right away. Like you just start slowly expanding into it and it makes a lot more sense looking at a visual like that than something like a ladder or, yeah.
Yeah, and like that really helped me with like the expansion part really is like the growing pains aspect of like self-realization. Like that can be rather painful and grief-stricken and really unfamiliar and uncomfortable and at times completely destabilizing. And so it was like understanding that that was just actually part of the expansion process and that there was a next place for all of this to go and that all of this would be stabilizing into something that would turn into a really balanced trait and capability within myself that
Right.
wasn't just seeing everybody's feelings, thoughts, and emotion. I wasn't just entering a room and like, oh my God, I can feel everybody. I'm crazy or I'm autistic or I'm telepathic, like, or whatever it was. I was really unsure of what all of these dynamics were. And so I was really uncomfortable all the time. And through understanding myself in this way, I'm like, oh, there's nothing wrong. These were
I'm
growing.
growing into something that's uncomfortable initially.
My ability to perceive subtle energies and like just the subtle aspects of living. And like if you go to the spiritual community, they're going to be like, you're a witch, you're a channeler, you're this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like normal
Yeah,
human.
it's so interesting the sensitivity piece I feel as I continue to go down my path. Like I just notice it keeps getting increasingly more noticeable when I'm doing things that don't resonate for me. Even like drinking coffee these days, I'm like, I would and I think a big part of it was, drinking alcohol so much that I just got so disconnected from myself. But it's been almost 6 years now, like 5.5 years that I haven't drank. So, but it's so interesting because I talk to clients all the time and they're just like, when's it gonna get better? And like, it's been 6 months and this and that. And I'm like, oh boy. It is a lifetime, and it's like it's so hard to explain to people, down when you're well down your own healing path to be like, I hate to tell you this, like it's gonna be years and years, but it's like every year you're like growing more closely towards your wholeness and your fullness. But it's like with every there's also more of things like becoming apparent as you evolve that like weren't things on the radar before, where it's like, wow, I can feel people's energy much more potently. And I am seeing it's like we're gaining awareness as we're traversing our healing. So there's going to be things that continue to evolve in layers like destabilizing and otherwise. And just understanding, even as simply as fear is a necessary part of success, or sorry, failure is a necessary part of success. I think fear and going through destabilizing moments and understanding them as part of the process just takes the edge off them a little bit and realizing this is part of your expansion. It's not all love and light. And that I think we all have intuition and sensitivities and an ability to tune into energy. I think it's a capability that we've all dimmed down in ourselves. And so it's like rather than just acknowledging it as a part of our spiritual evolution and tuning in to the language of energy and the energy that's around us all the times. Like we've just been conditioned out of that. So conditioning back into that doesn't make us autistic or even like highly sensitive. It's just like this is our natural nature that we're reclaiming and understanding that like in doing so there's turbulence along the way. And it's kind of even what we were talking about before hopping on the call where understanding my cycle and knowing like today I'm going to be lazy and I'm just going to give myself permission to do that. And then, knowing that's just part of the process. I think the same thing can be true for understanding like some of the things that happen when we do start to wake up and notice like think shit's coming online and it's going to feel weird when you are noticing like I can't even drink coffee anymore because of how anxious it makes me. And I used to chug like 10 cups a day and not even pay attention. So it's like this interoception and like understanding the language of my body and sensitivity and all of that stuff. It's like, yeah, do totally get what you mean, where it's embracing it as a evolution of ourself and not like you're a witch, even though I do like witches.
All you want. I'm the bitchiest witch. But like to me, it was like it's like people be like, oh, it's empathy. I'm like, this is not empathy. Like I'm telling you, I can walk into a room and I could feel everything that that person was holding. And like I'm like, is it mine? Is it? And it was like this entire thing. And then I realized, like, by understanding my own evolution process, like, I'm not even highly sensitive or anything like that. I'm actually just like right on time, and I'm actually liberating years of suppression of this um, sensing ability in myself. It's like you said, it's coming back online, and it's like not only is it coming back online, but I'm feeling safe enough to let it be all that it needs to be without pathologizing it
And
or
labeling it. Yeah.
it or like
It's like, are we highly sensitive or is everyone just like
well,
tuning out these
am I a mystic?
qualities?
It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not a mystic. I'm Krista. I'm me. And like I'm just I our senses actually, as we evolve and as we can start to take additional perspectives through maturity in our lives, like our senses develop to enable us to do that. In order for me to take perspective of other, I needed to sense into other. And you know what I mean? And so it's like your senses are going to continue to develop. If you've realized that you're a sensitive person, liberate more of your sensitivity because I guarantee you it's part of your personal power. And once you integrate your sensitivity, you're just becoming a more beautiful, powerful being. And like all of these abilities are safely within you now, and you can discern and use them to whatever you need. So,
Yeah. I love that. I'm really excited to read this book, Radical Wholeness. I feel like it certainly will help as well because I do think that there is some um, lacking structure for sure about like how to give people the kind of structure their soul is craving to walk through this understanding of themselves. And there is a lot of like vague, what you said, um, just I forget the word that you use, like fantastic or something about just a lot of like whimsical sort of like this and that and blah blah blah. But it's like, but where are we at and how do we get there and what should we expect along the way and what stages are we going to go through? And there's a lot of like the dark night of the soul and that's it. It's like, okay, so how many dark nights of the soul are there? And like I need to know a little bit more here.
and there's actually so many of the Dark Night of the Soul that I'm like, what the hell? Like, what are we in this for? And I'm like, I can't be in the abyss this long. And then I realized the reason why people say it takes 7 to 10 years is because no one knows their ass from their elbow down here. No one's charted this. No one's mapping this. No one's coming down there with lanterns for anybody. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's really like my mission, my big grand goal is to just like demystify the mystification that is coming home to yourself, whether it's through spirituality or through developmental understanding. It's like,
Well, I think that you hit a really good crux is that like spiritual it's not and that is the beauty of like holistic health is that it's not independent of psychological development is like it is all intertwined and I think even reclaiming spiritual health as part of the matrix of real health with real health well, you know what I mean like our mental emotional physical and spiritual health as giving them equal pieces to the pie and bringing it into the table instead of having it be this fringe thing elsewhere that's not acknowledged by our society as a real component of health, even like we were talking about earlier with the ways we look at creativity and entrepreneurship as if it's like, oh, that must be nice. When it's like in reality, we should be looking at spiritual health and just the same with just the same level of like pragmatism, scrutiny, academic, like minded. Like we should be looking at it as just the same way that we're looking at all these other pieces of health and bringing it in and aligning it with like how do spiritual health and psychological development interplay, and how does that interplay with physical health when our spiritual health is amiss or unacknowledged. And so think what you're doing is beautiful. It's like giving some accountability and structure to the spiritual space. And at the same time, it's also bringing a light to it that like it needs, that it's not this fringe thing that's nice to go to sister circles sometimes and like have the drums. It's like, no, this is actually a big piece of our overall well-being that we need to be able to measure and understand like where we are on the spiritual spectrum of evolution. And so
Yeah.
it's really cool. I can't wait to continue to be informed by your work and weave it into my own. I love helping people find, and especially, the analytical part of me, like really loves finding those areas of overlap and like roadmaps and how can we assess where we're at here, like in terms of progress and where we need to go. So it's super, my brain is like, yes, yes.
Yes. Another good book for your audience might be The Artist Way,
Oh, yeah.
which I think
Julia
is
camera. Yeah.
good to just crack your head open to what's possible. But I'm really also loving this book, Flow, by
Oh, yeah.
Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I cannot say his last name. I do not want to butcher it, but what if your audience is like, just wanting to explore what's inside of them, what may or may not be possible. Like psychological development is a beautiful map for our becoming and what's possible, but it's quite advanced, complex, and nuanced. So like I feel like it's best done with like a guide. And like I like am now realizing I'm coming into communities to like teach these things because it is that kind of material, but exploring the creative aspects of ourselves will also by proximity may force you to grow up and develop. So
Yeah.
those two books are really great ways to just like start expanding your mind into like what is inside of me that I currently.
Mechanisms by which we can access our spirituality is creativity and psychological development and like different vehicles to get us there.
Yeah, like it doesn't always have to be like sitting down on a pillow in white robes with, a sage stick. Like spirituality is actually in everything, and it's a matter of locating yourself in all that you do, which in itself is a spiritual experience, and bringing that aspect of yourself in all that you do. So
Yeah.
it's really like spirituality. It's more like
Yeah.
essence discovery and
I
bringing
love-
parts of you home.
Yes, I love that. And everything can be that opportunity to connect to spirituality, even mindfulness and meditation. When clients are like, well, like, but like, how do I do this? I'm like, you can literally do this while you're washing the dishes. Like, we compartmentalize things like so much. And it's all, like you said, informing itself, like the way that you are throughout every day, the way that you do all of your activities. And that's a main reasons why I started weaving in the creativity and crafting to just be like, these talks that we're having about personal development and growth, like they can be playful, they don't have to look a certain way. Like we can bedazzle pumpkins while we talk about shadow work and just lighten the mood here. And like creativity is a spiritual act. And so I just love everything
Yeah.
that you're saying. And I know we have like so many more questions, but I'm glad that we spent so much time on this piece because I think it is really true for a lot of people. Like going into the spiritual community for the first time, A is like discernment and seeing if it resonates with you and where you're at on your own journey. But B, just like anything else, knowing that yeah, you have to feel good about what you're engaging in and the practices you're working in. And people are all people. So people are peopling in every field. There's going to be people who are maybe not fully walking in their integrity or maybe taking advantage of like emphasis on spirituality in our culture these days. And so just I'm a big proponent of like listening to your inner authority as well and like making sure that you're finding practitioners that align with that and where you're at. And then also knowing you can gently outgrow them too and move on, thank them for what they provided. And
Yeah.
so before we go, I think I'm like, oh, what one? So the other thing, we'll have to do another one talking about like
You do a
post
part
like
two.
sobriety and because I know you are sober too, and that's been part of your healing journey and motherhood and um but in the theme of like business, I know one of your big things that's been really cool to see has been sharing the evolution of your business from the ground up and not just like you've been sharing the struggles of making yourself seen and feeling insecure and showing up authentically and the inner workings of your business as you're creating it, which is so cool. And I really love that approach as well, just letting people see behind the scenes a little bit more. And I think that kind of sharing is only going to become more at the forefront as people get more and more fatigued by curated perfection. And I think we want real people. And so that's been really nice and refreshing. And so how do you feel like people most limit themselves when it comes to creating their dream business, their dream life? Like, what do you think are some of the biggest limitations we put in front of ourselves? And what advice would you give to anyone who's like maybe in a 9 to 5 or maybe a mom and they're just like, I want something else, something more creative, something of my own, entrepreneurship. Like, tell us about how you ditched the fear to start and
Hmm. I feel like I ditched the fear and the fear simultaneously ditched me. Um, So, what I can say is this, like, I think the biggest thing that holds a lot of people back and certainly held me back was this like limiting belief, this idea. And it's less about when the idea originated and got baked in, although it will be fruitful if you discover that and pull the thread and go find that. But it is something that I think a lot of us hold. It's the idea that, oh, that couldn't possibly be for me. It was like, I want to make an impact. I want to fulfill my potential. It was this understanding that like I had so much more to give. I wasn't being utilized. I was being underutilized in everything that I touched. And I could just sense this in my whole life. And so I think what was holding me back for so long is that I saw success in others and was not able to locate qualities of myself in those others. So I thought, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to create. I don't know how to write a book. I don't know how to teach. I don't know how to do any of these things. So I might as well not because who's going to listen to me? I've only ever done this 9 to 5 job and I've only ever been a mom or whatever it was. And I think and what that felt like in my body was this split in desire, this desire to assimilate and be accepted and fit in and like do what was expected of me and what was safe and what was going to get me that applause by my, immediate group. Or it was, and then battling this like other part of me that was like, no, you're meant for something more. And if you can just trust this knowing, if you can just let this stabilize, like an entire next part of your life will catalyze. And I did this dance for months. And then it was this like just staying with it. Like really, it was the daily practice. If I could say there's one thing that categorically makes everything make sense and makes it all integratable, it was the daily practice because I would have these feelings come up and every day I would sit myself back down and I would get clear and I would get quiet and I would get really still on this idea that I have something to give. I have something to say. And when paired with meaningful conversations in community or being in the right type of environment or listening to the right book or whatever it is, I realized that in order for me to get there, that the only lever I could pull to actually get there was to be an entrepreneur. There was no other option for me. I was like, if I want to be in service and I want to deliver impact and I want to do it on my terms, then I have to be an entrepreneur. Like
the
it's it
resistance is.
The
It's
resistance was
crazy.
crazy because there were many days, and there, I'm not gonna lie, I have these days often. I think that they're healthy signpost of growth, but it's like there were many days where I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna go get a part-time job in like a gift shop. Because like I just was like, I want to work, but I this is so hard. But I once I got through that and
Isn't
real
it like you're once you get through it and you start doing it, it's like so liberating. You're like, I fucking love this. And there's still days where you're like, I can create my own reality. And I think that the belief systems that you start to see reinforced as you move into them is so cool. But you do need to be delusional at first.
you have to be, you have to, what really is you have to sit down with yourself and let your dream become your dream. Like give yourself the space to dream into your dream. You most likely have never even given yourself the space to let that take shape. And once you
Because you immediately said, I can't do that.
not
I don't see.
for me, it's not this, or you sit down and you're like just completely confused on where to start. But if you just sit down and you let the dreamer inside of you come alive for more than 2 seconds, you're going to sensorially feel that knowing in yourself that there is something within you that only you can bring forward. And it's your moral and ethical job to sit with it long enough, to develop it long enough to bring that which within you only you can bring forward. Like it's your work, it's your creative job to find that, to bring it forward. And I think that's what entrepreneurs have done all along. I think that's what you and I do. And I think that that's what's possible for all of us. Is there something unique in all of us? And if we just sit with it and we give ourselves permission to dream into it, we eventually arrive at a place where we pull the entrepreneur lever and we're like, okay, I can do it.
Yeah, it's so. I wish you're doing such a good job of articulating it, but it is one of those things where it's so hard until you've walked through it to be like, listen, you just have to break, unlearn. That is when you start learning they mean by saying like unlearn everything you've ever learned and start there because with spiritual development, because I very explicitly and very poignantly remember in college, I've talked about this on the podcast before, taking a business class, like Business 101. And I remember there was an entrepreneurship course and I saw entrepreneurship, and there was something inside of me that was very intrigued by the idea of creating my own thing. But immediately, I couldn't do that though. I couldn't do that though. But where the fuck does that thought come from? Why? It's so interesting. And me and Brandon Nappy, the spirit, you know who he is, the spiritual lecturer at Yale, and I were talking about that, and he said there's, I forget which author he referenced, but a book about, that inner resistance we all have. It's like a inner resistance against our highest potential, and it's just we all have it. I still have it, every day. We have it even in terms of like making choices we know serve us best, which or the ones that don't. And it's like we know we don't feel as good when we eat like 3 donuts or 10 cups of, 10 cups of coffee or whatever, and there's still the resistance of doing it anyways. And I think like that's just a microcosm of that greater level of resistance we face when it comes to stepping into our full potential. And we all experience that inner doubt and that pull towards our comfort zone, pull towards what's familiar, and just really understanding that that resistance exists for a reason. The fact that the resistance is there in the first place means that there's something there to like excavate and dig up and explore. And it's like the more I've learn to explore my triggers, it's funny to look back and see the things that sparked little triggers throughout me or moments of reflection along the way and being like, wow, so crazy that from that early age of like 17, 18, freshman year in college, like, no, I can't do that. And look at me now. And so really noticing that inner dialogue and how it pops up and limits us and keeps us very small, so much more than the people who don't like our shit on Instagram.
And resistance is like, um, you know, Another good book for your audience might be The War on Art by Stephen Pressfield, which okay, so like he just did a Huberman episode that like honestly like just to see that this is being talked about in what I qualify as like Gen Pop is so exciting for me. So he that's a good place for anyone to start too, is because he talks a lot about resistance and the meaning of creativity and to and the more resistance we feel actually is like such a signpost that it is aligned with our soul's work. So like if it's the work from that of your soul, you actually feel more resistance because it is directly correlated with your becoming and this drive to become more whole. And it's not that humans are resistant to becoming more whole. It's the societal structure that we're moving in that isn't greased properly for us to pursue such work. So it's like we feel this resistance because we have been told for so long that we're supposed to go another direction. And at times feeling this like soul urge, these nudges from within to pursue something that we feel so unfamiliar, so uncomfortable, and we're like, oh my God, how dare I? But if that is something you're feeling and you feel it really strongly every time you think about that thing, that is the exact thing you have to do.
I
Like, that is the thing. So whatever that thing is if it gets really loud and intense right before you even start to do it or think about it, resistance can be a lantern for you in the beginning. It really can. It feels unholy, like you shouldn't be pursuing that. And that is the green like blinking light. Do
Yeah.
it.
Like the little voice, like, who do I think I am? I'm not Oprah. I'm not this. Who is, it's like, no, that you could be. And it's one last thought too is oh shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. I'm like, oh, well, that one last thought, too bad. Just that idea of resistance, is like it's so true, and just really recognizing it, like you said, as a green light, I think is oh, that's what I was gonna say too, is I think sometimes when we have those whispers or like screams that they become from our soul through the cognitive dissonance you mentioned, and just that increasing feeling of discomfort in the lives we're creating, or lack of alignment, or a desire for more. A lot of times, like our soul purpose, it requires us to be seen as who we really are instead of our persona, our whatever version of us we've deemed that like the people around us like the most and that society approves of. And so I think sometimes the callings of our soul demand visible authenticity, and failing at being visibly authentic is much scarier than failing at the curated persona that everyone's accepted you for. There's the potential of failing for who you really are, but I just don't think there's any failing in who you really are, and even those failures or perceived failures generally bring us even closer to our soul's truest expression. And like understanding that those failures are part of the journey, it like makes it a little less daunting. But I think that that is something for me, is like the masks must continue to come off, and like that's really scary when you're creating something that's so intertwined with the language of your personal soul and the way you see the world, to think that people, and I think that's why when people aren't supportive when you're on Cringe Mountain, it's kind of like, come on, motherfuckers, I'm out here bearing my soul. Like, you could shoot me a like because you are not doing this. And I think that's part of what the refusal to like is, that they aren't expressing the inner workings of their soul. And deep down, I think we all wish we were a little more.
Yeah, and like I think of like the Hunger Games, like you know how they used to like send the little things to like help them in the moment. It's
Yeah.
like those who are in the Hunger Games are sending those little beacons. Like I see all of your content and I'm like, I'm sending you the gold little fly thing with wings. I'm like, yes, girl, get out there. Yes.
Yeah.
But it's harder for people to I think it's obviously they're resistant to something that they have not woken up to as a possibility for them. And so it's like it's easier for them to be like, no.
If I don't acknowledge it, it's
Yeah,
gonna
it's
trigger
easier
anything
for them
within
to be
me.
like, no. Because if they accepted it, if they look at it, it almost creates an experience of self-realization in that person in the moment that like, oh, if Katie's doing that, that means I can do that. And like, oh, if Krista's doing that, and I used to slam shots with her at the bar and she's completely changed her. You know what I mean? That means that that same thing exists inside of me. And I think that what we're experiencing is really the resistance of that acknowledgement within themselves.
Right. It's the same resistance we're feeling towards like the voice inside us is the same resistance they're feeling. It's just towards our voice awakening that same soulful essence inside them, their same desires. And I'm sure that there were points along the way before we woke up to like even our desire to do what we're doing, where people doing what we're doing was slightly triggering to us because we weren't quite ready to wake up to that power within ourselves or our ability to create whatever reality we desire. Not that everyone has the desire to get on social media and share, but I think that there's an element of, visibility, chasing your dreams, the general themes that run through putting yourself on social media and creating a business that can be igniting to a lot of people in whatever form or fashion they need, whether that's inspiration on their own path or maybe a little trigger to their own awakening and to their own potential. So
Yeah, let
I
your
always say, like, we're all medicine for each other. So, however people receive us and whatever, whether that's inspiration, feeling triggered, feeling resentful, not wanting to acknowledge it, I think when we're standing in our light and sharing our message from a true space of like, I'm here to like provide my light in the world, sharing with positive intention, like, if you are in your integrity, whatever you trigger in someone else, good or bad, is the medicine they need. And I think that's really beautiful, like byproduct of the human ecosystem and just
and
all kind of triggering each other in ways that we need to grow.
and I really think that like you and I won't like say like we're like the Picassos or anything of that of nature, but like I think that we're experiencing maybe much of what an artist experiences. Like we create something from this place within ourselves that is the culmination of how we're perceiving the world and what's value and what's wisdom and whatever that is, and we put it out there. And like to use spiritual terms on this, it's like then we need to practice non-attachment to that which we put out there. But it must be what an artist experience in the sense that like you're creating to a place of completion and then you put it out there for the world to do whatever it must with it. And it's like in the spiritual sense too, it's like, whether that's medicine for some, in one way and then it plants a seed in another and it becomes something later. It's really not up to us to decide. Actually, it's just getting ourselves to that place of like publishing and then continuing on, that the medicine is best delivered, I think,
Yeah.
and the art is the best art that it can be in that frame. Is like, I mean, the stuff that I put out there is so far below what I would call perfect or artistic or beautiful. And if I get stuck on trying to do all of that before I do anything, I'll never get my great work done.
Yeah.
Social media is just a lane on the highway in which I'm taking. It has nothing to do with my great work. It is just a vehicle to get me to a place where I can park my car and do my great work. And that's it.
Yeah. I love it. Ah, what a good talk to start my day. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I feel like I'm so inspired after this call. And so, before we wrap it up and head out for the rest of our day, would you mind just giving one piece of advice to anybody who's like really resonating with your message in terms of spiritual development, entrepreneurship? Like, what would your piece of overarching advice be to close the episode and also where people can find you?
My one piece of advice would be the most radically resistant, Renaissance driven activity you could possibly partake in today's day and age is to sit down, get quiet, and get still with yourself long enough that you can bring forward the dreams and gifts that are within you to be of service to those around you. You can't do that by scrolling. You won't likely do that by listening to a podcast or diving into a new book. I mean, it might supplement the sensation, but really the essence of what you're seeking is in the stillness of your own devotion to finding it. So if
Mm,
there's nothing else that you can do, and there's only one thing available for you to do to change your life, I truly believe it is getting quiet enough to hear your own self think. Everything comes from here, everything comes back to here, and nothing makes sense unless it's created from here anyway. So that's my piece of advice. Find that space.
yes.
I don't care if it's walking, showering, running, climbing a mountain, driving your kids, doing the dishes. Just create it and watch what happens. That's it. And if you're looking for me, you can find me on my Instagram at Christa underscore DSC, or you can go to my website, which will be live this week. And
Woohoo.
it is, let me tell you, I think it's just christadiaz.com.
Yes. I can't wait to check
So
it out.
yeah,
Awesome.
go check. There's all my services. All of the development stuff is now a service as well for communities, coaches, leaders, teachers, all of it. And then there's obviously my consulting services with building services for any kind of provider. So
I love
that's
it. Well, I'll definitely be referring lots of people your way, and also so grateful to have your wisdom in my own community of contacts. And I just really look forward to seeing how your career grows and takes shape. And I'm just grateful to know people like you.
oh, thank you. I am too. And it was such a pleasure talking.
I
And I can't wait to see what we do in community together too.
I know. So thank you everyone for listening. I'm sure Krista and I will definitely do another podcast episode in the future and talking about more in alignment with entrepreneurship, authentic entrepreneurship, sobriety, motherhood, but otherwise go give her a follow. Definitely a meaningful, worthwhile follow on social media. And yes, give us a like, share, and subscribe if this episode resonated with you. And we can't wait to hear what you think. Until next time, bye everyone.